I'm too small, had a really bad off season, and I think it's best we take some time to grow some more to actually be competitive. And so although we're quite certain that this is an April Fool's joke, it doesn't have to be. Brandon Harding saying he's too small is literally 100% correct. Coach Greg, in today's video, Brandon Harding ends his prep. It's the second time in a row that he's had to back out of competition. And what is his excuse this time? He is too small. And so remember this, Brandon Harding is about 6'2" and in the offseason about 250 pounds. But the last time he competed, he was in the 190s. And at 6'2", he's just as tall as Wesley Vissers. And in the professional division, if you're 6'2", you can weigh over 240 pounds on stage shredded. Now, Brandon Harding is big. He's about 250 pounds, but that's in his offseason. And his last competition, he was in the 190s. Even if he puts on a ton of muscle, let's call it 20 pounds. 20 pounds of muscle since his last competition. He is, in fact, still too small. Imagine if he stands on stage at 6'2", standing perhaps 215, maybe 220 pounds, he's going to be giving off 20 pounds more of muscle to a guy like Wesley Vissers. And so what chance does he have? Well, I'll tell you, none, as in zero. And so rather than continuing to diet down and lose that precious muscle, he's decided to take in another offseason, put on more muscle than last time, and compete once he's ready to do damage as a pro. Remember, when you're a successful amateur getting in first or second place at almost every competition you've ever entered, it can be an eye-opening experience to compete as a professional bodybuilder. But just because you're not big enough to win doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Case in point, Coach Greg. Gonna bring it to myself. Yeah, I know you hate me for it, but I'm gonna talk about it anyway. I was competing and winning overall competitions weighing 149 pounds, competing against heavyweights. And so sometimes bigger is not necessarily better. But I, of course, know and realize that as an IFBB pro, the more muscle you can carry, the better you're gonna do in classic physique. And so this brings up a point that I wanna make. Imagine Brandon Harding not thinking he's big enough to compete as a pro. If Brandon Harding, who's 6'2" and 250 pounds in the offseason, competing at close to 200 pounds, show ready perhaps at 5% body fat, if that's not big enough, what chance do the rest of us have? How do you think he's going to get better? Does anyone believe that Brandon Harding is 100% natural? He's already using, perhaps abusing, performance-enhancing drugs. And so in order to put on that extra size, perhaps get the size of Wesley Vissers, what do you think he's going to have to do? He's going to have to push the supplements even more. Going to have to take more risks, perhaps get negative blood work. And so what chance does he have? And I know it's easy for me to say that it's not all about winning, that you just do your best and should be proud of your accomplishments. And of course you can. But is there not something that could be done? Imagine if there was another category in the IFBB. Let's call it the classic physique lightweight division, where guys have to make a lower weight category. Reduce all the current weight categories by 20 pounds. And so, for example, if Chris Bumstead wants to compete in the lighter weight category, he'd have to weigh under about 220 versus 240. Does anyone think that Chris wouldn't look good at 220? I would argue he might even look better. With less muscle, he would be more aesthetic, perhaps, have more of the average guy's dream physique. And a guy like Brandon Harding, rather than having to weigh in the 240s to compete against Wesley Vissers to have a chance of winning the title, he could perhaps compete at 220. Does that not make more sense? Would you not want to see an extra category where Brandon Harding doesn't have to put on 40 pounds of muscle, but only 20, and then could compete at the top of the weight limit and have a chance to compete at the Olympia? Because for me personally, I don't think that guys need to get any bigger. Every time they keep upping the weight categories or rewarding greater size and so on, all it does is motivate and push other people to abuse PEDS even more. One of the reasons that I couldn't make it to the Olympia stage competing in classic physique because I'm not big enough. I needed more muscle. At 5'6", my weight category is 193 pounds. Even at 193 pounds, I'm very small in comparison to a guy like Wesley Vissers. Did you not see me interviewing him at the Arnold Classic? Look at the size of this guy in comparison to myself. Even at 193 pounds, full, shredded, vascular, I would pale in comparison to a guy like Wesley Vissers. But if they lower the weight classes by 20 pounds, you could get a much more aesthetic looking physiques that some people could perhaps even achieve while being natural. And so do we not want to promote natural looking physiques that are more attainable to the vast majority of people? Of course, we still want to see the freaks. We want to see the open class bodybuilders. We want to see the biggest, baddest freaks of the world. But we also want to see something that's more attainable, a physique that we can aspire to. And so I wish there was another category, whether it's called lightweight classic physique or muscle model or something, where guys with more average looking builds, and by average I mean absolutely astonishing, but much more realist, that people could compete on a level playing field. This is the end of the line. This prep is over and I won't be making my pro debut this year. I'm too small, had a really bad off season, and I think it's best we take some time to grow some more to actually be competitive. I'm sorry to everyone who believed in me, but this is now the second time I'll be ending prep. Maybe I'll never be ready. Who knows? And so it is, of course, possible that he's just making a joke, that he doesn't think he's too small, that it's just April Fools and so on. But let's assume it's true. Because after all, this could be true to almost any competitor out there. Whether you're an amateur, professional, you oftentimes are feeling too small. If you're a powerlifter, you're feeling too weak. Just because you're not the biggest, the strongest in the entire field doesn't mean you don't need to compete. If it was only the best of the best at competing, only one person would compete. Only Chris Bumstead would show up. And so, of course, I understand that when you compete to win, you compete to beat your other opponents. But you really want to be doing is competing with yourself and beating yourself. Your personal best, if you can top that, you are in fact a winner. You can't affect how other people look. Brendan Harding can't affect whether or not Chris Bumstead or Wesley Vissers show up into a competition. And so if they show up, I'm certain that he's going to lose. But just because you can't win a competition doesn't mean you don't try, doesn't mean you don't give your best, doesn't mean that you don't have fun in the sport. The day I turned pro was the day I knew I would never ever win again. Not because I don't have confidence in myself, but because I have realistic expectations. The sport is gone sideways, man. The fact a guy your size is too small is outrageous. You look unreal, dude. Keep grinding. And so to me, that sums up everything. Brandon Harding is a beast, but remember, he was 40 plus pounds below his weight limit when he turned pro. 40 plus pounds. Let that sink in. And remember, when you turn amateur, they add in 10 pounds to when you're pro. And so despite the fact that you might be at the top of your weight class, the biggest, the baddest you could ever be, as soon as you turn pro, you now have to gain 10 pounds of muscle in order to be truly competitive as an IFBB pro. What pressure do you think there is? Do you really think that people out there competing for the Mr. Olympia or Arnold Classic Championship title are not going to go to any extreme to put on those pounds? Of course they are. It's all about winning. Not many people have the resilience to resist the urge to perhaps abuse performance-enhancing drugs or do whatever it takes, so to speak, to become the biggest and best in their chosen sport. Great move. It's 0 point just to do a show as a pro if you can't go for the win. One more year off and you will be in the top. Personally, I don't think this is great advice. If you only compete when you're going to win, hardly anyone would ever compete. I'd rather see you compete for the love of the sport. When I competed as an amateur, I never thought, oh, I'm going to become a pro one day. I just competed when I loved it. And remember, I did 42 competitions natural before I used performance-enhancing drugs, and I never turned pro until I was 35 years old on my 50th competition. That is a lot of competing. And to this date, I've done 59 competitions. And so do you really think I only competed when I was going to win? It's not just about winning. It's about giving it your all, being your best version of yourself. No matter what sport you choose to compete in, it's all about being your own personal best. When I compete in running, swimming, cycling, badminton, you name the sport, I was never the best, but didn't mean I didn't try. I gave it my all and I wanted to see and prove, test myself to see how good could I actually get. Whether I got to the top, that I was the ultimate best athlete, it didn't matter. It's all about enjoying the sport and doing it for your love and passion for the sport. And so although we're quite certain that this is an April Fool's joke, it doesn't have to be. Brandon Harding saying he's too small is literally 100% correct. When he stands on an IFBB Pro stage against the likes of Chris Bumstead, Wesley Vissers, Urs Kalasensky, or Ramon Dino, he's going to look tiny. That's right, at 6'2" and all that muscle, he's going to look small in comparison to his other opponents. But doesn't mean he can't try, doesn't mean he can't try for a top 5, top 10, whatever. But it does give you an idea of just how massive classic physique competitors have actually gotten. If Brandon Harding looks small compared to these guys, imagine how big these guys actually are. And if you've seen a guy like Urs Kalesensky in the offseason weighing 275 pounds at 5'11", under 11% body fat, you will truly realize just how massive classic physique competitors really are. I wish the IFBB would install some changes, lower the weight category standards to have more realistic competitors competing in the sport, add a second category with smaller weight caps so that people with more realistic looking physiques can compete with the best of the best. And if you're looking to stay natty, the best stack I can think of is GO2 Max combined with Turk Builder. Increased endurance, more energy to train harder than last time, better gains in the gym. Interested in any of these supplements, enter code Greg for 15% off. Click the link in the description. Subscribe, click the bell button, comment to boost the algorithm, like the video if you liked it. Don't forget to watch one of those two bloops. And of course, we have the cookbooks, the training book, the Circle Diet book, both available in PDF and hard copy. You can get those on my website. Don't forget about the Harder Than Last Time clothing line. Also, join the 300,000 plus newsletter subscribers and get your free up to 50-page free diet and training program right now. Click the link in the description, code Greg 15% off. And until next time, I am out.